Okay, thank you for joining us. LegalEASE is presenting a Supporting Our Communities with Recovery Assistance webinar specific to next steps after a fire, what you should do. We have two of our partnering law firms that are assisting us with providing advice specific to the devastating impact of the wildfires in the US, but specifically for the 2025 California wildfires. So I'd like to introduce our firms. I'd like to thank you first and introduce our partnering local law firms, Access Lawyers, Attorney Mario Jaramillo, and Mr. Martin Kaufman of the Kaufman Law Firm. Thank you for your willingness to educate and provide general advice to those impacted. Please note the attorneys participating in this interview today, as well as myself, are in the fire areas and are currently experiencing the devastation of this unprecedented event in real time, along with our neighbors and our local communities. Martin, if you wouldn't mind, and Mario, if you wouldn't mind introducing your firm. Mario, I'll hand it off to you.
Sure. Sure. Thank you, Charlie. So thank you for the opportunity. As you mentioned, we're on the front line, so to speak. My house buttressed the Hughes Fire that was just passed this week. So we know, and we've gone through what many people have gone through. Fortunately, my house has been spared, but we know of myself and Marty know of a bunch of people that unfortunately their houses have not been spared. Right. So we both empathize and sympathize with everybody's situation, as well as we have the legal knowledge and acumen to be able to assist everyone in guiding them through this process, which can be very confusing, very complicated, and lengthy, right? And we know there are a lot of players in the game, a lot of attorneys out there, advertising for us, what have you. But Marty, who I've worked with well over 20 years, has specific experience in dealing with fires and related litigation. So I'm very, very proud to bring him on board with this. And with that, I'll turn it over to Marty.
Thank you, Mario. Yeah, my name is Martin Kaufman, but my friends call me Marty. I'm a trial attorney, 34 years, Southern California native. I have a boutique law firm in West Los Angeles. I've worked with Mario, as you said, for quite a while. I'm an AB-rated trial attorney and designated as a super lawyer, which is the top 2% of all attorneys. And it's really a pleasure to be here and to be able to inform people about perhaps the steps that they need to take, the things that they need to start to think about, and really how to protect themselves as they move forward in this process, in particular if they had a massive loss, including the loss of one of their properties.
Thank you, guys. So we will go to the actual interview questions, next steps after a fire, and what you will learn. We'll just get started with the first question. There are a lot of people who have been displaced by the recent fires. Many are overwhelmed about what they should do. What should be the first step someone takes once they are safe?
So if I can jump in here, I believe the first thing that someone has to do is they have to acquire their insurance policy and make sure that all their policy documents are pulled together. So most of us never even have a policy. They've never touched it. They've never seen it. They've never read it. That policy is going to govern what the ultimate recovery is. It's going to govern the steps that need to be taken. It's going to govern the coverages that you have. It's going to be the roadmap for ultimately the financial recovery and the ability for someone to rebuild. So that's critical for them to acquire those documents. Once those documents are acquired and they're analyzed, that individual that suffered the loss has to then undergo the claims process. So they have to put their carrier on notice that they have the loss. Many of you that have suffered a loss have probably started that process already, but if you haven't, there are certain timing provisions. So it's important that you notify your carrier, or in certain instances, you can also notify your insurance agent or your broker. And you have to make sure that your broker is someone that's going to convey this information directly to the insurance company. So I think that that's really the most critical thing that has to happen. After that, we have to actually review, or you're going to have to review your policy and your coverages. There's something called the declaration page. It's going to lay out exactly what the coverages are, how much money that you're entitled to recover for the structure, for related components of the structure, whether additional dwellings are covered. There's actually an A, B, and C portion to policies. And so that's going to have to be analyzed. And then next, I would say you have to start the inventory process. And many of you have probably already started that. You have to literally take a document, go room by room, item by item, and I would document every single item that's been lost in conjunction with the fire. I'm talking about everything from covered things and uncovered things. Many of you have artwork, jewelry, other items that are not going to be covered. Those required, and many of you didn't realize it, but those required specific coverages in order for you to obtain a recovery. If they weren't specifically scheduled in your insurance policy, the insurance coverage itself is going to have a cap, and it's not going to be that large.
Okay, thank you. Next question, what damages are you able to claim if you are a victim of a fire?
Well, I mentioned that there are 3 different categories and components of an insurance policy. Those coverage provisions are coverage A, that's your dwelling. That insures your residence. So that's clearly the main item, as obvious as that sounds. There's coverage B, which is the coverage for other structures, detached garages, if you have a workshop, if you have a guest house, something like that. You have coverage C as you move forward, and that's going to be the additional coverages that we're looking at. Coverage C could be other items specially scheduled that, personal property or things that fall under the general coverage of C, personal items generally in your home, other structures. And then, of course, coverage D we get into, which gets a little tricky. That's going to be loss of use. So that depending on how the insurance policy is structured, there's going to be things like ALE, which stands for additional living expenses. Those are things that are going to be incurred during the period of repair or replacement, or fair rental value. You may be able to recover the rental value of the residence by looking at comparable rentals in your given area. So it's a very complicated question to see exactly what you're going to be able to claim if you're a victim. My general rule is claim everything, write everything, put it all down, and submit it to your insurance carrier. If they deny you, or if they tell you that you're not covered, the insurance company has an obligation to spell out in great detail exactly what they're covering and what they're not. The insurance company is supposed to stand in the same position as an individual, as you are. They're supposed to be fair. They're supposed to ensure that whatever you're entitled to get, you get. Now, as we know, sometimes insurance carriers don't stand in that position. They don't do the right thing. That's why we have bad faith lawsuits. That's why we have disputes with insurance carriers. But ultimately, I think in touching on the damages aspect of this, document everything that you possibly can, down to the last toothbrush.
Okay, thank you. Next question, what is the process for filing insurance claims for a home, car, business, or other property that may have been damaged by fire, smoke, or water as a result of a blaze?
So I think I got a little ahead of myself on that one because I did go over it before, and essentially you have to put your carrier on notice. So that process, and every company has different forms, and the processes can be a little bit different. If you have an agent, reach out to your agent. That person is going to be the best person to guide you. If you have a lawyer that you're working with already, obviously that lawyer can interface and help you with that process, working in conjunction with the agent. And by the way, it's not just about total losses. As the question points out, you could have smoke damage. And that is a very significant item of damage. That could be hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage. But it's critical, if that is the case, for instance, with smoke damage, that you go room by room and you literally write down an expression of exactly what it's like in the room, how you're impacted by that smoke damage. Once the claims process is started, The insurance carrier is legally obligated to get back to you in a very short period of time, and that will start the process. And that they should, if you have a decent carrier, and that is a question now with many of us in California, they should interface with you to assist with the process.
Next question. What steps should you take to ensure that your damages are covered fairly and within your full legal rights?
So, given that insurers are supposed to promptly make the fair, balanced, thorough investigation of the claim, these carriers are going to be overwhelmed. They're already overwhelmed. There are tens of thousands of losses that they're going to have to adjust through multiple fires. This is an unprecedented situation. So in order to make sure that whatever damages that you possibly believe are going to be something that you want to recover, you have to really bear down on that itemization. And in the process of that, document. So for instance, if you took a picture with your loved ones in the living room of one of your homes, that's a very valuable item, right? Because that photograph is going to show all of the different contents that existed at that time. So keep track of all of your pictures. Keep track of any itemization that you have in terms of receipts. So if you bought a television set in the last few years and you actually have the receipt for it, you have your credit card receipt. When you itemize the item, television set, living room, it's going to really serve you well if you at that time pull together in a notebook, right, or some other storage, ability to store it. Pull together all of your receipts. Have everything there so that your damages cannot be questioned. So again, it's all about documentation.
Thank you. Next question. Do you still have to pay your mortgage, rent, and car note?
So the unfortunate answer to this is yes. Depending on who's backing your mortgage, who's backing your car note, I'm informed that some of the mortgagors, some of the banks are giving some level of relief. But that's unclear at this time, and it's really going to depend on who your lender is and who's holding your car note. Who is the person that you're renting the item from that was lost. Mortgages, there is a possibility with certain lenders, including those that I believe have Fannie Mae loans, that they're giving 90 days forbearance, which is not much. But you have to ask. Once again, you have to document and you have to ask. So I would get on the phone, I would notify the lender of the loss. And of course, they're going to want to be interested in that because they hold the note on that property and the property is no longer there. And in fact, I'd point out that you have a legal obligation to put them on notice. Once that happens, you may be eligible for forbearance.
That's great information. If pets were harmed in the fire, will your insurance pay for veterinary treatment?
It depends on what the insurance coverage is. I would say as a general rule, the answer is no. If you went back 10 or 15 years ago and we had these really expansive, great homeowner policies that all of us had once upon a time that really don't exist anymore, some of those had those extended coverages that covered for pets and that vet bill. Now, some of us have private vet insurance. I have one for my dog Luna. And frankly, I haven't gone back to read that to see exactly what would be covered, but unless you specifically scheduled it on your insurance policy or you bought that private insurance, that's going to be a tough one. You're going to be out of pocket.
Okay. Is there any tax relief for fire victims?
Mario, you on this one?
on the tax relief. That I do not know. That I do not know, but I wouldn't be surprised. Well, what I do know, excuse me, I talked to a friend of mine who was accountant the other day. Filing for taxes for your income taxes has been extended now to October as a
Yeah.
result of the fires, right? And so that's going to benefit, quite a bit of people, especially if their files went up in smoke and they had hard copies of stuff that they don't have in the cloud that they can't provide and they got to regather it up or what have you. So there definitely is that. As for tax credits, I think it waits to be seen, right? I think there's a good chance that'll probably start happening, especially now with the new administration in place. And I believe, the president's going to be out soon checking out the damages of the fires and stuff like that. So who knows what he'll announce at that point in time as to some sort of relief on the tax on a tax related matter. But I do know that your income tax filings did get extended until October, which is going to be beneficial for many.
And there may be, for those of us that are fortunate to have a good accountant, it depends on the nature of the loss. And of course, I'm not giving any accounting advice here, but from a strictly educational standpoint, and what my understanding is that depending on the nature of the loss, there may be offsets from your income that ultimately is taxable. So definitely a strong question. And by the way, there's an 800 number to call our friends at the three letters, the IRS, and they actually will give you some guidance on that.
Okay. If you're in need of temporary housing after being displaced, do you need to sign a lease?
Well, so again, speaking of unprecedented times, and I apologize to those of you who are going to listen to this and read this, that of course you know what you just went through and what you're undergoing now. There is a massive shortage of available properties, in particular in the LA County proper area. Those displaced from the Palisades Fire, the Eaton Fire. We have thousands of displaced people. There are moratoriums that have been put in place right now on raising the rent, which is actually AB 246 is going through the California legislature as we speak. They're going to be freezing rents for a year in the state of California. And there's also a 10%, there's only an ability for a landlord to raise their rent 10% from the last lease, assuming that they had a vacancy available. As far as needing to sign a lease, unfortunately, I think that's the reality. Unless your insurance policy is such that it's going to afford you and they're going to make arrangements for your housing, which is a possibility. Once again, got to contact the carrier and or your agent to contact the carrier. A lot of people are on their own. They're scrambling and they're going to need to sign a lease. And that rental may be something that you can recover in conjunction with your coverage.
Marty, let me jump in real quick on this because I can speak firsthand on it. We had a fire in one of our rental properties, not related to these wildfires, but last year. And so what we determined through our policy, and as you had indicated earlier, read your policy, see what it covers. If you find out from your insurance company the period of time that they'll reimburse you or cover those lease payments or loss of habitability payments, then you can enter into a lease for that period of time, because then you'll know what the insurance will cover, up until, let's say, 6 months, a year, or what have you. That way you can rest assured that at least that'll be paid before the insurance company stops paying out on your living expenses at that point in time or what have you, and you have to make other arrangements. So I think you can be confident if you talk to your insurance company and find out what it is or how long they'll pay for a lease or temporary housing, that might coincide with the length of the term of the agreement that you could enter into.
Yeah, and by the way, before we jump to the next question, I just wanted to supplement, move back that one question where we were talking about tax relief. So I'm reminded of a couple resources here that I pulled up. So if you go to the California Board of Equalization's disaster relief webpage, you can apply and may be eligible for disaster relief. So that's something that may provide you with, at least in terms of your property tax reductions, you can get a deferral. So I forgot all about that. My apologies. And then, of course, there's other tax relief that may be available to you if you own a business and you lost a business equipment and fixtures, if you have agricultural loss, including orchards or other agricultural groves, even owners of aircraft, boats, and certain mobile homes, those folks may be eligible for disaster relief. And I also note here that certain property that you have, if there's a reduction in value by more than $10,000 due to the disaster, that may afford you relief in terms of property tax. So that's obviously going to be critical here. So even though folks are still going to owe their property taxes, I absolutely would recommend that you reach out to your local county tax assessor and the Board of Equalization and scour through that material and apply for the relief, disaster relief.
Well, that's a good segue to this additional question. I think you've answered some of these before with respect to what important documents you should have. But if you are seeking recovery assistance and tax relief, what other legal documents should you prepare or replace after a fire?
Well, it is a very broad question, and I do believe we've touched on most of it. Some of us lost critical documents, such as the first thing that popped into my mind was if you had a trust, for instance, that was in your house, and that trust document is going to control if perhaps your possessions, it may control other family members' possessions, and you're in a position of trustee. Your obligations don't stop simply because you lost the documentation. And a lot of us created living wills and living trusts. So I think it's essential that you reach out to your counsel. And if you lost those documents, you're going to have to replicate those documents. You're going to have to recreate. You have to have a copy of your trust. God forbid something happens to you and you've got a contingent beneficiary and you've got a contingent trustee that's going to be involved. Those people are going to need those documents to make sure that whatever arrangements were made, they're adhered to. And again, the insurance documents, you got to get your hands on those. You download them, get actual hard copies, put them in a notebook, keep them, learn them, study them, because they're going to be critical. Mario, anything else on this?
No, if anything, I would add is that if you haven't done so before, now's the time to definitely upload your documents into the cloud. I think for those of us who have had important documents in the cloud, they're easy to retrieve. They may not be originals, but they can be the next best thing to original, at least to authenticate it or to have something to go off of as you recreate originals. But I do think, as Marty mentioned, the estate planning process is incredibly important to make sure that you're on top of if your estate planning documents were unfortunately destroyed in the fire. You can check with your legal counsel who created them, see if they have copies of them to recreate them, or just start them, de novo. And we offer those services as well, both at my firm and Marty's as to estate planning assistance.
Thank you. Next question. What have you learned from representing other fire victims? I know, Marty, you have a lot of experience in this. Mario explained to me your history, and so we welcome hearing from you. Just anything that you may be able to share with us that might put some of the impacted at ease.
Well, the unfortunate reality is that the vast majority of us who've suffered a loss, partial or total, are going to find out that they are underinsured. The insurance industry, as we well know, has been in crisis. I personally, on 2 different properties that I own, have lost my insurance, and I was required to go with the state insurance plan, otherwise known as the California Fair Plan. California Fair Plan has, among other issues, it has a max amount of recovery of $3 million. It will also focus in on exactly what the coverages are that you had in place that you were paying for with regard to the structure, which is the primary aspect of the loss. So many of us are going to be underinsured. I think you touched on it on your intro, was Unfortunately, it's quite embarrassing. The number of lawyers that are flocking in to Southern California that have no presence here whatsoever. They are carpetbaggers. They're coming in. They're running Instagram ads. I'm seeing more ads on Instagram than for this fire and these fires than I've ever seen in my entire life, by a major margin. There are millions of dollars being spent by attorneys trying to fish out cases. And frankly, a lot of those lawyers are looking for their fees, but they're not looking out for the best interests of their clients. Now, I'm not going to tell you that we don't want to be compensated ultimately for our work. I'm like everyone else. I work for a living, but I like to think that, and I know that Mario and I put our clients' best interests first. We wouldn't be involved in conjunction with these claims unless we were doing this out of the goodness of our profession and our heart. We feel for our clients, and I will tell you, I'm really I'm fairly disgusted over what I'm seeing, and I'm concerned that the listeners and the readers ultimately of this are going to be taken advantage of. So if you are going to retain counsel, please make sure that group of attorneys has experience in wildfire cases and suing utilities. If you're ultimately going to be suing an insurance company because you believe that they should have covered your loss and they've acted in bad faith, make sure that those lawyers know bad faith and even have a track record going after that particular carrier.
Okay, thank you. Mario, was there anything you wanted to add?
I think Marty summed it up nicely right there. I mean, again, his experience speaks for itself. And it is very, very important that, again, your listeners and your readers hire competent counsel that they believe they could trust, go with their gut. And I think we're that team. But it is important that they ask those questions, those tough questions. What experience do you have? What can I expect? That's going to take place in being represented by you. Those kinds of things that are very, very important, so that that you're going to be taken care of as you go through this emotional, painstaking, and lengthy process. And that way, you can trust that the legal aspect of it is being handled correctly by the right team that you've hired.
Next question. What should people be asking but may not be thinking about in the immediate aftermath of a fire?
Well, I don't want to be repetitive. I think we've covered, the vast majority of that. I mean, I think, a lot of people are not going to know where to go and where to turn. They're not going to know who to talk to. They're getting bombarded by attorney ads right now. They don't know who's a competent lawyer and who's not. If you speak with a lawyer, you need to ask them what their experience is. You need to ask them if they've tried cases. You need to ask them what their recovery rate is. So in conjunction with the Grass Valley Fire, Mario and I recovered 100% of all claims that we advance for our clients. Ask the question. Find out what these lawyers have done. I'm looking at a law firm this morning that hit me on my Instagram ad. I went down and I saw under the attorney advertising disclaimer. I wanted to see where are these guys from? I've never seen them before. I've never heard of them. They're from San Juan, Puerto Rico. They look like they're from here, but they're not. I personally wouldn't hire a law firm from San Juan, Puerto Rico to deal with a fire claim in the Palisades. So you really, really got to think about how I'm going to protect myself.
That's very important. So we're down to our final two questions. How to protect yourself from predatory land speculators making aggressive and unsolicited cash offers.
You want to tackle that one, Mario?
I mean, it'd just be as simple as block them. And if you have legal counsel, defer to legal counsel. But it's going to be intense, right? And they're going to prey on your emotions. And oftentimes, many of those people, will speak in parables, so to speak, so that they took care of the neighbor's property down the street and they got a really good deal. It may not be the case. So there's nothing wrong with saying no. right? And so, but again, if you have legal counsel, defer to legal counsel. If not, just go, look, I'm having my insurance company handle it, and just, refer them to your insurance company as to the losses that are being handled there. But you have the power to say no. You have the power to say no, and there's no rush, right? There's no rush. This is going to take time. And so they're going to prey on that, because again, every day you're suffering because you're not in your home. You're somewhere else. You're uncertain as to where your kids are going to go to school, again, nearby, or you can be back in your community again. So they'll prey on those things. So just be very, very careful with it. Block them. Just say no, as the old adage goes. And if you have legal counsel, defer to legal counsel, defer to your carrier, in my opinion.
And let me add one point on this. So a decision is going to have to be made by every person that lost a structure, lost a house. Am I going to rebuild? This is a really important question, in particular for our friends that had losses in the Eaton fire, because there's an avenue in that particular fire, as I said, to go after a third party for those losses that are not covered. It may not be the case for the other fires. We've not seen, for instance, in the Palisades, that there's any credible third-party source that would be responsible. And I know we've heard about water pressure and fire hydrants. I know we've heard about the reservoir not being filled. It's upsetting, and those things are all true. But suing the city of Los Angeles for that is going to be, in my opinion, a non-starter, even though I've heard that there's a lawyer that filed a suit already. I think it's going to go nowhere, frankly. And what's really important here is if you do have a third-party claim against a utility company, there's a legal theory called inverse condemnation, which, without getting into a whole bunch of legal stuff and mumbo jumbo, that's effectively a theory that your property was taken from you and you were damaged by way of the fire. If you do not tell your insurance company, and if you do not express an intent and a desire to rebuild your property, you are not going to be able to bring an inverse condemnation claim against anyone. If it's your choice that you're not going to rebuild, your ability to recover damages is still there against Edison, but your damages are going to be dramatically limited. And we can go into a lot of the detail on how that is, but it's really important, again, that you seek competent counsel, in particular for those in the Eaton fire, before you would ever talk to any land speculator and get out. Really important.
And then the final question is it really mirrors the question that you just answered, but in our introduction to doing this interview, Mario suggested that I add it. So how to protect your assets while your property is exposed. We were talking about predatory lending and anyone that's kind of pursuing homeowners to sell their properties for lower value. And I guess anything else that they may have that are currently assets that could benefit them in the interim until they're able to secure insurance funds or relief from the government.
Yeah, and what I heard the other day, which was amazing, along these lines, which is this is not me talking as a lawyer. This is me talking as a person who's kind of tech savvy and in the world. So you want to talk about predators? There are folks out there, bad people, who are preying on those that lost their properties and attacking them financially through hacking. So there's already been information. They're going through lists of people that lost properties, or the owners. They've gone through the property rolls. And if they have your email connected to your name and that property address, there are people that are getting different sorts of emails that are fake emails that are designed to allow those third parties to get into and hack your email, get your financial information, and so on and so forth. I know it sounds wild, but it's actually happening right now. And a lot of those emails are coming from insurers, purportedly, or banks or lenders or the US government, and they're not. They're phishing emails. They're not real. I strongly suggest that unless you know who the sender is that's sending you something, do not click on it, do not open it, do not set up websites and things, because that will create a portal to a second disaster, which is you losing your finances.
Okay. Well, that is just all valuable information. Mario and Martin, I want to thank you so much for your time and valuable insight. We sincerely appreciate it. We wanted this to be an educational, general advice type only webinar, and I feel that we have accomplished that. So thank you again. I do want to add a disclaimer notice and just state that if you have been affected by wildfire and have lost your residence, it is crucial to consult with a qualified attorney who specializes in insurance claims, disaster recovery, or property law to address your specific circumstances. The laws and regulations surrounding disaster recovery can vary by jurisdiction, and only an attorney familiar with those laws in your area can offer tailored advice. If you are in need of resources or assistance, feel free to contact us through LegalEASE. You can visit our resource page at go.legaleaseplan.com/recovery assistance, and we can connect you directly with Mario or Marty's firm or any attorney within our network with the expertise to assist you based on your preferences. We support you and are ready to help as best we can. Please stay safe and take care.